Just reintroduce my team. So we've got Gavin Hutchison, his planning and delivery. So his team have pulled together the activity plans, a lot of them. And Tim Drennan, who you know as well, has been deeply involved, especially in a lot of the water supply discussions we've had in chambers here. And there's a few others from the team as well. So what I'll do is I'll go through, we're starting off with water supply, and we'll go through, if I can get the mouse to work. Can you see if I can get this side? With water supply, we're going through the first part of the first section of the activity plan. So I've summarised each slide down just a bit of a paragraph about what we do, and we can go in depth at the question session at the end. So water supply, what we deliver, water supplies that are safe to drink, and we acknowledge they may not comply with all the new rules because, as you know, we're going through the whole compliance process at the moment. Interestingly, one of the biggest risks that we've noted in the activity plan to our water supply is backflow, and we have a backflow program running. Providing high quality water, so that's taste, smell and appearance. Operating water supplies in a reliable manner, so it's available when you need it. Operating water supplies in a responsive manner, so quick to resolve issues. And water supply networks and operations are sustainable. So this is where our consumption, monitoring of consumption, leak detection, that sort of stuff comes in. Just a snapshot of the assets, the water supply assets, over 1,800 kilometres of mains, over 1,700 kilometres of sub-mains. You'll know that because you'll be aware of leaks and things that pop up in your areas. 235 kilometres of laterals, 15,000 fire hydrants, 144,000 metres. So it's quite an extensive asset base here. On top of that, we have the pumps, buildings, wells, wellheads, reservoirs, tanks, and aside from what we do in town here, there's the 6 Banks Peninsula water treatment plants. With all of that, over the range of things we measure, we are 53 to 79% customer satisfaction with the various aspects of the supply. Why do we do this? In terms of community outcomes, there's a number there, but the major ones are contributing to green, livable city, thriving, prosperous city, collaborative, confident. All that comes on the back of having a resilient water supply network. Strategic priorities, how does this support these? Major ones again, an inclusive and equitable city so that everyone's got the equitable access to good clean water. Balancing the needs of today's residents with the needs of the future, and managing ratepayers' money wisely. So just making sure that we spend wisely and invest in the right areas. In terms of climate resilience, a number of factors there. With all the planning we do, it's around understanding, preparing and designing for climate change. And that comes in a number of areas, whether it's areas that are potentially subject to sea level rise, or whether it's because of higher rainfalls, higher temperatures. We take all that into account. So managing the available water resources, and with all of that, spending in a way that reduces our greenhouse gas emissions. There's 2 or 3 slides there on climate. How are we planning on it for our future impacts? So in terms of climate change, quite significant there. Education, things like what we've already brought in with water restrictions, excess water charges, managing the resource that we've got. The big one for us, of course, is regulation and reform. So we have chlorine currently, which you're aware of. In the future, maybe fluoride, UV treatment, having to deal with the contact time, and just in general, the overall compliance of our systems. So they have a big part to play in what we have to do. Infrastructure renewal, probably about 2/3 of our program is renewals. You're aware of issues we have with our pipe infrastructure, the age of it, and the ongoing collapses, water main blowouts and that type of thing. We had a major one just, was it last week, in Dyers Road on the main highway. You know, just something that you can't predict, but that's the state of the infrastructure. Huge benefit from technology growth, working with our smart cities team and to give us better monitoring with smart meters and that type of thing. And that just helps us manage the network better and in turn manage the resource. And one of the big impacts is we have a number of major projects and due dates coming up in year 4 and 5 when you get to see the capital program. There are upgrades required for pump stations and the like. In terms of levels of service, a lot of the community levels of service that you'll get to see at a later date, we have 16 community levels of service. A lot of these are DIA driven. We have to have them in our plan, so there's no choice there. We also have 16 management levels of service. Now, they're mainly around customer satisfaction and the like. Now, a good example of why we need to review these is one thing we have to do is chlorinate our water, but we have a level of service around customer satisfaction with the taste. So it's not something that we can influence. We have to do it. So why would you have a level of service? So those sort of levels of service we're going to review. How do we manage our assets? It's quite a detail there. There's $3.7 billion worth of water supply assets in the district. We always aim to renew and replace at the end of the useful life. Sometimes things are brought forward to coincide with other projects, such as roading projects, so that disturbs our customers less. We're improving our scheduling. We're running 3-year delivery programs with major contractors, so we're looking at smarter ways of delivering these programs and less disruption. On top of that, you've got the new and updated assets. So we've got infrastructure going in to support growth and also improved levels of service that are generally required to meet those compliance issues and regulatory requirements. These tables in slide 6 and 7 are yet to be updated. They're still based on the 23-24 annual plan, and they'll be presented next week. But predominantly in terms of the significant programs, we have major pipe renewal programs, drinking water compliance, which is chlorination, and rolling out of the smart meters. There's some of the big ones there. In terms of financial resources, again, this will be updated next week, but that gives you a bit of an indication as to the levels of operational investment in our business. Going through to negative impacts, I think some of the big ones, and you'll hear this from the ratepayers anyway, is it's the costs associated with fluoridation, UV treatment, contact time, new pump stations. If we don't save water, we're going to have to build new pump stations. So there's a big negative there in terms of delivering our program. And of course, big one is ratepayer dissatisfaction with chlorination. As the network gets bigger, you will increasingly get the cost of operating the required systems will grow. So we need to, that's one of the risks of some of the stuff going in. UV treatment plants aren't cheap to run. Currently, with things like fluoridation, we haven't been instructed to do so, so they've been pushed out past the 10 years anyways. So that's a real quick snapshot, because you've had previous briefings on water supply anyway. and happy to take questions now.
Okay, thank you very much. We've got Sam and Yanni, then Kelly.
Yeah, hey, thanks very much for that, Brent. I just wondered when you talked about the contractors, I'm kind of thinking about the way people have been talking around the lack of resource, I guess, in the market to deliver the work. Do we have a view on whether we're just using top tier, or actually whether or are we getting them to sub out a lot of it to that sort of lower ranked resource in terms of actually getting work done and it being delivered?
Yeah, currently we have a panel of contractors. There's a lot of capacity in the market, and it has been for some time, particularly in the pipeline. So it's a spread of tier ones and tier twos and tier threes across that we give work to. We're looking to do more long-term contracts, so we can give more a longer guarantee of work to contractors so they can resource up, because that's part of the issue of resourcing. So when the market picks up, we give them a guarantee of work, they'll resource. There's probably more challenges in the electrical instrumentation space. We have a large renewals program going forward. That's one area we're looking at to try and improve delivery. And again, that's working with the suppliers to give them guaranteed work that they can resource up to deliver our program. Okay,
no, that's really useful. Just one other one was just, unless you had more there, Tim. Sorry.
I was just going to say that, of course, the tier one contractors do use subcontractors anyway, but it's the surety we get from engaging with them and their systems they have in place pay off in the long term.
And Sam, we did the panel work this year at the beginning of the year, if my memory serves me correct, in terms of strengthening the panel approach.
Yeah, I guess, and I think Tim's given me it was just making sure that we're not sort of tying ourselves up in knots when we've got people in the market that could deliver what we're not delivering in our capital program. So, and just the second one was around, so that there was a slide a couple back, don't worry about going back to it, just in terms of that, at the moment, the 10-year budget for Three Waters. I just wondered again how that compares to the new regulatory environment, and in terms of, I guess, again, I'm just comparing it to commentary, but this massive additional investment that will need to be into infrastructure. So are we comfortable that that number is in fact what we should be delivering, or is that sort of, will that be worked through in the coming weeks?
We are still working through it, but in general, we have in the forward 10-year program, we have the upgrading of the chlorination systems. I mentioned briefly that until we are instructed to fluoridate, that's pushed out past the 10 years anyway. The other, we're still doing the testing on the class 1 water, but from that point onwards, there will be a program put in place, for example, for the UV systems. But it's looking like it will be a 15 to 20-year program to be affordable, because it is a significant investment, and we'll have to have discussions with the regulator as to the appropriateness of that.
Okay, cool. Hey, thanks for that, guys. That's great.
Thanks, mate. Yanni, please.
Is it possible to get an updated the integrated water strategy? Can we get the implementation plan and an understanding of what's being done, what hasn't been done, and what the changes are for the LTP?
Yeah, don't see why not.
Because I guess when I look through the document, the one thing I don't see is a reference to that strategy. So we've adopted the strategy at a governance level, but it's really hard to know what's being done, what hasn't been done, and what resources we might need. So the classic one is like, people will be aware of this, the rainwater and grey water. So like, yeah, I see it's listed as one of the climate change mitigations, but to reduce emissions, but I don't have any sense of what budget's required if we want to do that.
Sure. Well, we'll take that offline, but we'll see if we can get through.
There's quite a good
current copy of that.
Yeah, there's quite a good implementation plan that the staff presented probably a few years ago to council.
We'll circulate that.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Just the question, I mean, 100 million for chlorination, is that kind of, did I see somewhere? It's about 95 million.
It's hard to know because every pump station is different. Do you want to?
The budget is budget's 95 million.
Right.
For chlorination of the distribution system.
So are we going to ask the community questions about that?
And what sort of questions?
around whether we should spend the money over what time frame?
It'll be in the LTP and it'll be spread through the LTP, so everyone's welcome to make comment on that.
Right.
Remembering that we're
it-
specifically in a regulatory framework, so
Yeah.
it's I don't want us to be misleading to the public.
Yeah,
What's the time frame that we have to be compliant by in terms of spending all that money?
We need to have that conversation with the regulator and work through that.
Yeah.
But indications sort of suggested is 15, 20 years in some cases.
Right. So why are we rushing on other things?
we already had the temporary chlorination systems in place, so we were able to comply with that component straight away. This is the upgrade to the permanent systems, which gives you better control and continuous monitoring over the dosing, and that can be controlled remotely. So this is the upgrade to the permanent system. These things are already past the use by date.
Right.
Yeah, we complied with what we could at the time.
So fair to say that government's put $100 million cost on us, plus more.
The regulations require us to meet certain standards, and that's right throughout the country. So there's a number of ways you can do it. Chlorination, through previous briefings we've given you, we've shown you the advantages and disadvantages and relative costs. So yeah.
Okay, thank you. All right. Kelly, please.
Thanks for the presentation, Brent. It's really staggering looking at the snapshot of what you guys provide. You know, that there are so few issues with it. You know, it's extraordinary, really, when you look at 1,800 kilometres of water supply mains, etc. I guess a lot of that sort of stuff has been renewed since the earthquakes. I'm really interested in your problems around surface flooding and you know, how difficult that is for you guys to plan for and to deal with, because that would seem to be a really sort of difficult part of your job.
So we'll do surface flooding when we get to the stormwater activity plan, which is later on, but
Okay.
yeah, we can address that then.
Yeah, no, cool.
Okay, all done, Kel? You good?
Yeah.
Yep, Sarah, please.
Thanks so much. Couple of things in the that last slide with the negative impacts on wellbeing thing. In the environmental, we've got soap water intrusion in coastal regions, effects of water abstraction. Is there any thought about including the potential for the nitrate incursion? So we've had some readings now in some of the Norwest bores of increasing nitrates, and I'm just wondering whether that would mean at some stage shifting some of those as well, and whether we should be starting to account for that.
Is that a requirement?
Yeah, I think some of that will have already been planned for, just with the depth of the wells that we are using currently. So the saltwater intrusion side of things is typically the shallower bores close to the coast.
Yep. Yeah, I was just thinking it should be sort of listed in
Noted in there.
in our significant negative stuff as an issue. And when we look at the potential changes to the levels of service, just in the agenda rather than on the slides, there's one where a number of continuity of supply complaints per 1,000 properties. So are we looking, it wasn't clear if we were looking at deleting this or just changing it, or is it going to stick at complaints or actual continuity issues? Like,
there's another,
actually there's some, yeah,
there's another piece of work to put all those. I've been discussing it with Peter's group as to how we package up those. There's more changes proposed and what's appropriate, so we'll bring those back.
okay, and the percentage of real water loss and those kind of things.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, thanks.
Okay, and just one quick question for me, Brent. With your panels, so you've got 3 tier 1s or whatever they are. When you put something out to those 3 to price, it's just on price. You don't do weighting on them, because the way I look at it, they've walked over broken glass with their health and safety work and all that stuff in sustainability get to be the 3 anointed ones that gets on the table. I know that some of the transport ones, they go back and weight them, but I feel that if the 3 contractors, if there is 3, have done all this work and jumped through all these hoops, it should come down just to price because they've already walked over broken glass to get to the top of the tree. Do you do weighting on your prices?
Typically, it is price only, but there are projects where we also add methodology into that as a weighting. So yeah, we have obviously reviewed them as a company and their people, but if there's a particular project that we think is complex, the methodology is an important factor we all consider.
Okay, thank you. Righto, far away, keep going.
Okay, so the next one is wastewater. So again, I'll go through just in summary as to what's on these slides. So what we deliver, operating wastewater services in a reliable manner. Council has a high wastewater discharge quality. Council operates wastewater services in a responsive manner. Public health is protected, and council wastewater networks and operations are sustainable. So a lot of the work that we do, or a significant amount that we do, is compliance related. An example of that will be there's a large pump station in Summerfield on the books for, and that's required. That's part of our program for reducing overflows into the rivers. So that type of thing is in the wastewaters. The rest of it, the bulk of the program, is around running and maintaining our networks. Oops. What we have here in terms of a snapshot of our assets, very similar sort of thing. 1,600 kilometres of mains, 300 kilometres of pressure mains, 64 kilometres of vacuum mains, 1,000 kilometres of laterals, over 9,000 local pressure sewer system tanks, the post-earthquake, 4,353 vacuum sewer system chambers, 150 pump stations to run, 84 lift stations to run, 3 vacuum stations, 248 pump station control systems. We've got 5 wastewater treatment plants. So it's not just the one at Bromley. We've got the ones on the peninsula, an outfall pump station, 3 ocean outfalls, and 2 land irrigation schemes. So again, it's a massive, massive asset. With all of that, our community overall are saying they're 59% satisfied with what we're doing. So that's not bad in terms of average across the city. Why do we do it? Again, contributing to major community outcomes of a green, livable city, thriving, prosperous city, and a collaborative, confident city, all on the back of having a good, sustainable wastewater network. Strategic priorities, and this is again around being inclusive and equitable, reducing emissions. That's a major one for us to focus on at the wastewater treatment plant, and managing ratepayers' money wisely. So spending the money at the right time, at the right place. Climate resilience, and I've put this on all of them: understanding, preparing, and designing for climate change. We do that part and parcel of what we do for all of our projects. The major one, and a lot of the program out at the wastewater treatment plant, is the end game is investigating ways to reduce or utilise the greenhouse gases. And another one at the wastewater treatment plant is the significant energy consumption, looking at options to reduce that. As you know, it's one of the largest industrial plants in Christchurch. It has a major impact on our carbon footprint, and that's taken into account in everything we do there. Future impacts, climate change, major assets at risk. That's from sea level rise. We have some quite low-lying areas. We have increased infiltration, especially with some of the mains networks being very coastal, and increased odours. Now that's until we get the permanent solutions back at wastewater treatment plant. We do run the risks of seasonal change when it goes from winter mode to summer mode and before the algae start growing. So that's a continuing risk there. Again, regulation and reform. Making sure that we're complying, potential future changes in compliance rules in the future. You don't know. It's just something that's part of what we deal with. Infrastructure renewal, aging pipe infrastructure. We get collapsed mains. We had a collapsed sewer main in Anzac Drive. Our brick barrels are over 140 years old. And man, if they made stuff these days like they did back then, we'd be in good shape. But it's a big risk. Technology growth is an area that we will win. One of the future impacts, just being able to monitor and operate our systems and bringing in new technology at the plants. Major projects and due dates for compliance and consents are again bottlenecking around years 4 and 5. We've got plant upgrades at the treatment plant at Bromley. We have the Akaroa and devotional schemes, and we also have, I mentioned before, the Summerfield pump station, that's all to do with reducing our wastewater overflows. So some things we can push out, some things we're determined by where our consents run out as well. So that's what it's about. Levels of service. We have 11 community levels of service. Again, a lot of DIA driven here, but 17 management levels of service. So many of these, again, are around customer satisfaction. And some of them, for example, are around different response times that we send the contractors out to. We just need to have to review those and see that they're relevant and meaningful in terms of the delivery of what we're doing here. How the assets are managed. So again, another $5.6 billion in assets, which we went through a wee bit earlier. Renewals, again, we replace them at the end of their useful life, sometimes again in conjunction with other repairs if roading renewals and what have you. And managing to do a bit more through the improved scheduling and the 3-year delivery programs and working with those major contractors again. And same as for water supply, new and updated assets for growth and improved levels of service. Generally, compliance, growth, and regulatory requirements drive those. Capital expenditure, again, these are the updated for the annual plan projections. So the capital program will be presented again next week. But the major ones there again, pipe renewals, the trickling filter replacement, Akaroa reclaimed water treatment scheme, the Christchurch wastewater treatment plant renewal program, Summerfield pump station, and another one on there, the Grassmere facility, which is supporting some development in that area. Resourcing, again, that will be updated. That's based on the 2023-24 annual plan projections. And then the possible significant impacts, again, if we don't do things like sorting out the wastewater overflows, that's massive impact on the environment. We will continue to get ratepayer dissatisfaction with odours if we don't do the upgrades at the right times. We have a program in there for controlling midges, which part of that is the planting work that's going to be going on around the ponds at Bromley, and just the cost of operating treatment plants. That's not going to go away. It's as we have a growing population, we can't turn off treatment plants. We can't restrict it like we could, for example, with water supply. And yeah, just managing those overflows, that's probably one of our biggest environmental risks, and making sure we comply with our current consents. So that's a very quick snapshot of wastewater, if there's any questions.
Okay. Yanni, then me.
Yeah. So I think in previous LTPs we've had sort of submitters, asked to do more to reduce the wet water or the dry, both the overflows through the dry and wet wastewater overflows and the environmental impacts. Under this LTP, are we likely to see an improvement in urban water quality based on these activities, or is it going to stay the same, or is it going to get worse?
Every time we implement a project as part of the overall program, the water quality will improve.
Right. So in the past, I think we've had a gap of about $25 million to stop the network from going backwards. Is that gap being plugged now, and are we getting ahead of it?
Well, you'll see that in the when the capital program's presented. But as an example, that one pump station there, which is Summerfield one, which is linked to overflows, is what?
30 million.
About $30 million on its own.
Right.
And that will save a significant amount of risk.
So how are we measuring the improvement to water quality?
I'll have to check, but we are measured by the number of overflows. Frequency. Yeah. So they're monitored.
Okay. So I'd just be quite keen to get a little bit more understanding about that, given that has been one of the key issues in the past. I just wanted to commend you for acknowledging in one of the introductions the impact of the earthquake repairs, which basically I think we should also do the same for the water supply, where the government changed the standards and changed the budget so that we wouldn't get a lot of the stuff fixed that we thought, or strengthened or renewed to a level that we thought would be adequate. And I do wonder whether it's useful to show over time what's happened, pre-earthquake, post-earthquake, and where we're at. The only other thing I was kind of keen to understand was, and I don't know if this is something that you can discuss now, but it seems to me that there will be a big question about the future of the wastewater treatment plant. And I'm just wondering how we engage the community over what the options are through this process. We were supposed to have some high level kind of concepts by November last year, but we still don't seem to have any sense of what the options are. And I appreciate that we're in insurance negotiations, but yeah, I just wanted to understand through this process how we're going to engage the community through the funding that's required and what the options are for the treatment.
Thank you, mate. Question from me on it. Oh, yeah, okay. I saw you press the button to say you were going to stop talking.
Sorry. Yeah. Well, I did. So to get an answer.
So just to clarify, in terms of the future of the wastewater treatment plant, you're talking about the upgrade program and the renewal of the trickling filters, that sort of thing.
Yeah. I presume there's an opportunity to look. As I understood it, we had a consultant looking, or we had someone looking at various options, looking to the future, post the fire, at what could be done. I appreciate there's sort of two work streams. There's the insurance negotiations, respect that that's confidential and very technical and very legal. But then the other piece of work, as I understood it, was there were being a look at, in terms of our plan, by November last year, we were going to have a kind of high level kind of understanding about what future options may be.
I think that would be a separate briefing.
Okay.
Correct.
Is there going to be in the LTP a discussion with our community over the choices that we have?
Yanni, until we know the outcome of the insurance situation, it isn't possible to answer that question so directly, and until that's completed. And once we've completed you and been able to brief you, the elected members, then you'll have the answer to that.
Yeah.
It is timing, yes.
Yeah, it is very timely.
What we have allowed for in the draft LTP, you will see chunks of money for the various things that are programmed to be renewed at the plant.
Okay, thank you. With a good day with the tailwind, will we never put another vacuum sewer system in? Because I think it's the biggest disaster since Dunkirk. If you had it all over again, would you use it again?
No.
Good, thank you. It's excellent. With the overflows at Summerfield, because the councillor down there caused a lot of trouble with a lot of things going on. Is that you in it, Mel? That only happens, it only overflows when we get a lot of rain, and that's stormwater ingress into the system. isn't it? Or will, so when you say you're going to do a new pumping station at Summersfield, that will handle the stormwater that's coming in to stop it overflowing. Is it just too small and it has to overflow into the river? Is that your issue?
If you are wanting a bit of an overview of the whole overflow situation, we could arrange a separate briefing on that if you like.
Okay, well,
then you'd get a bit of a picture as to what the issue is, what the quantum of the overflow is, and where the hotspots are.
And how much rain you need to have that problem to occur. So, okay, no, that's great. Thank you. And Kelly, then Tim. Oh, sorry, Sarah. Yeah. So Sarah's next, sorry.
Kia ora, thanks for that. Just two quick questions. When we look at the overflows, we tend to think about the overflows that happen during storm events and impact our rivers, those kind of things. What do we call the ongoing issues that are affecting whakaraupo at the moment, and that interrupted swimming and those kind of things last season? Is that part of the overflow work, or is that just general breakages and old infrastructure that are causing those? And where does that fit within the plan?
Yeah, I think that's a bigger issue than just our network.
Yeah.
So there's a whole bunch of things that are contributing to that bacteria getting into the system. But it will have a part, or we'll have a part to play with our renewals over there and investigations into our system.
Yeah.
But equally, it will be private property, septic tanks,
Absolutely.
freedom campers, all that sort of thing.
Yeah. Okay. But that work is captured.
It's separate to this
within,
overflow.
It is
separate to
separate,
overflow, but it's captured within
what that looks like.
the wastewater sort of space.
It's within our operations area.
Yeah. And I guess the question is then, do we have planned adequate funding for those kind of things? I noticed when we look at the level of service, we've got proportion of residents satisfied with the reliability and responsiveness of wastewater services, those kind of things. A lot of these are, also a target that has been exceeded in recent years, but should be achievable with appropriate funding. And that wording appears quite a lot. So making sure that we've got the right advice to make sure that we put enough funding on to achieve the levels of service is going to be crucial.
Yeah. So the fix isn't the expensive part. It's a time thing in tracking them down.
Oh, so, sorry, I'm thinking more broadly for stuff as well. So with all of our wastewater stuff, meeting our levels of service, just making sure that, and you've mentioned it in the risks section, in the risks about on page 112, the agenda, looking at making sure that asset management policy advice and performance section of the risks, it's really, really clear. And making sure that we get that really clear asset management information so we can put on enough budget to make sure that those things get met.
There's a number of things that we do and need to do in terms of that whole asset management area, included in which is more videoing of lines and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And Gavin and I have been in discussions about what we can do within existing budgets to increase that forward view so that we invest in the right areas. So it's not necessarily always a matter of extra resource. It's a matter of just making sure where we're spending it is right and how we spend it. There's for example, with CCTV work on our lines, which help to track down some of these leaks. If that's leading directly to a repair, then we just need to make sure we capitalise that work rather than have it hit on the OPEX budget, that type of thing.
Absolutely.
So it's really just analysing the problems and where we can work within existing budgets to hit that.
Yeah, having the right budget in the right place.
That's right.
But yeah, I think that risk space,
yes,
I think is really important, and making sure that we're hitting all of that.
It was worded carefully.
That's why we're here, right? Thanks.
Yeah, just quickly on the Summerfield pump station, because it's we've got a huge amount of infill happening there and it's ongoing, and that's just one of the suburbs that's happening in that kind of golden development ring. With the streets also like Dunn and Leach and others that are still have kind of the earthquake damage. Is that all going to be included in if we have a briefing? Could we, because there's a number of things and factors that cause flooding, isn't there? There's not just one thing.
You talking? Do you want to talk about this in the stormwater area? Or
Yeah, the stormwater.
Yeah.
So for,
Okay, yeah, we can have a when stormwater comes up.
Yeah,
but certainly we can, if there's particular suburbs, we can have a look at that for you at the time. Yeah.
So is there much wastewater overflow with regards to those areas?
I don't know.
Okay.
But if we get a briefing, we'll give you a better picture. As Michelle said, they monitor frequency and quantity, so that will give you an idea of those hotspots.
Thank you.
Pauline.
Thanks. So can we also have a bit of a overview on how that Bells Creek filter is working? Because we haven't heard much about that and what the operational cost of that is as well when we do the briefing.
Stormwater.
Yeah, stormwater one. Yep.
Thanks.
Okay, and one last question for me. Down at the wastewater treatment plant, Brent, is it mainly CO2 that squirts out into the air? Is that
I'm not a chemist, so
no, neither am I by a bloody long shot. But
it's what lot of methane, nitrous oxide.
Yeah, no. What I'm getting at, there's an opportunity, I think, because it was only earlier this year that the only person that makes CO2 in this country, the plant broke down and it caused all sorts of grief everywhere. They're importing it from overseas. Have we got a reliable source of CO2 that we're firing out that we can somehow capture and make our own CO2 to sell it?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay, no, that's right.
Might have an awful smell with it.
Okay.
I don't know.
No, neither do I. So it's okay. Thank you. Right. Do you want to get on to stormwater now, please, mate?
Oops. So this is where we have made some changes, but I'll just stress that we haven't lost anything. What we've tried to do with stormwater drainage and flood protection works is to make a much clearer definition between the two, because as part of the water reforms, stormwater drainage was to go with the new entity and flood protection was to stay. Now, there's been a bit more work since then around the definition of flood protection and what happens in urban areas. So what you'll see in the stormwater drainage activity plan now is some of the things that used to sit in flood protection. And that doesn't mean that we don't respond to floods, because we always did that as part of our stormwater drainage system anyway. It's an integrated system. If we build a basin, it's not just for storage, it's also for treatment, that type of thing. So just to start off, that's what's happened. And if you've seen that change, that's what's behind it. So stormwater drainage, we maintain waterway channels and margins, especially to improve environmental health. We manage the network to minimise the risk of flooding, damage and disruption. Manage the stormwater network in a responsible and sustainable manner. Again, environmental standards. Responding to flood events, faults and blockages promptly and effectively. So that's within the stormwater system. Implementing floodplain management programs to minimise the risk of flooding on or above residential flooring levels citywide. So I just stress that'll come up a couple of times. The level of service is to minimise the risk of flooding on or above residential floor levels, not just on people's properties. And waterways are clean and pollution is minimised. So that's why you'll see there's a lot of treatment and a lot of our consents are based around that, is reducing pollution getting into the waterways. Again, a snapshot of what we've got. Over 1,000 kilometres of pipe work. Again, some of them are over 140 years old. We have some amazing brick barrels out there. Pump stations, a mix of brick, concrete, timber, UPVC and natural linings. Includes a vast network of multi-value treatment swales, basins and wetlands. Nearly 2,500 kilometres of natural waterways, and a whole raft of hydrometric monitoring equipment to measure rainfall, surface water, sea and groundwater levels. Overall, across all our satisfaction surveys, 43% satisfaction with the level that we're providing. Why do we do it? Again, a green livable city, and is the significant one. Thriving, prosperous city. again, on the back of having a resilient systems so that people can get about their lives. Strategic priorities, being inclusive and equitable, again, making sure everyone has the same levels of service, reducing emissions as a council in the city, and actively balancing the needs of today's residents with the needs of the future. So that's part of that forward planning. With the reduction of emissions, we use natural systems. Not sure, sorry, I've been here a long time, don't know how many of you might have been here back then, but in 1999, we adopted a natural asset management strategy for our waterways. That's what we still use. And some of the other cities are just coming on board now. So there we go, we knew what we were doing. Adaptation and resilience, protecting biodiversity, water bodies, tree canopies, all important. Future impacts. Oh, sorry, climate resilience, skipped over that. Again, understanding, preparing and designing for climate change. And this comes through with increased rainfalls, that type of thing, making sure we've modelled for it. Reducing pollutant loads through source treatment and catchment management. You'll see the treatment basins and devices going in, and prioritising nature-based solutions. How are we planning for the future impacts? With climate change, looking at assets that are at risk, looking at increased rainfall. Again, regulation and reform, changes to consents and compliance rules. Infrastructure renewal, aging pipe infrastructure again. We do get collapsed mains with stormwater as well. Technology growth is helping in terms of our monitoring. Population, demographics, housing density changes, they're all going to have an impact on runoff, the impervious nature of the developments. Developing the Avon River corridor, looking at treatment options and stop banks and what sort of program we can put in place to achieve that. And of course, supporting growth, although we do get development contributions back on a significant amount of that. In terms of levels of service, we have 11 community ones and 13 management ones. Again, we'll be looking at reviewing some of those just to make sure they're meaningful and assist us in carrying out our work. How do we manage our assets? This is looks like the poor cousin, only $2.9 billion worth of assets in this one. A lot of renewals, replacing at the end of useful life. That's the advantage of some of the natural systems, is that's less intrusive and better for the environment when we're regrading banks and things. Improving scheduling, working with our natural asset management strategy and our other plans that we have in place, and again, new and updated assets for growth and levels of service, still generally required to meet compliance and regulatory requirements, stormwater management plans, that type of thing. Capital expenditure, again, the tables will be updated, but there are some major projects coming up, the significant pipe renewals, the Avon River corridor, waterway lining renewals, some large basin complexes planned for Horners and Cruisers Drains area, which is sort of heading out. I guess, I know Cruisers Drain runs through St Bede, so it's out that part of town. Filtration devices going at the ends of the Addington, Brook and Riccarton stream, just at the head of where it tips into Hagley Park. And those two devices alone treat over 600 hectares of catchment. So that's why we're looking at different ways of achieving the same treatment outcomes. Financial resources, again, these tables will be updated. Those are the 23-24 annual plan projections. Negative impacts. Potentially, there's still community dissatisfaction with the other flooding, the I'll call it nuisance flooding, but it's the other flooding of properties, but not above dwelling level. Compliance with consents. We are having some issues in gaining some of those consents to carry out our work, but we still need to do so and work in with the various regulators. Climate change and sea level rise will have a major impact, and directly in terms of the amount of rainfall, but also flood levels. Urban infill, it does create additional runoff, more impervious surface, so that's why it's all the more important to get our modelling and planning done. Cost of operating the stormwater network. As things get tighter, it's going to get more difficult. And the urban development that just increased our contaminant load, we're starting to make some headway on that in terms of the monitoring, which you'll see, and there's our quarterly report coming next week, which talks about some of the things that we're doing there. There is a risk of deferrals in some of these areas, so we just need to manage the funding and make best use of it, making sure that we, for example, in erosion and sediment control, making sure those planting programs carry on in the right places so that we can minimise discharge into our streams and rivers. So there's a snapshot of stormwater. If there's any questions there.
Yep, Ty, and then me. Here you go, mate. Yep.
Thank you. Thanks for that presentation, and I'll try and keep this pretty high level. Like, I suppose across the winter, it's been so wet. Hill suburbs, and like Littleton, Devotials, Corsair Bay, are experiencing like quite a lot of sort of surface flooding, crossroads and all that sort of stuff. Like the stormwater network doesn't seem capable of being able to deal with the amount of water that's coming down. A lot of the time, in my observation, it's down to clogged gutters and sort of drains. So I guess the first question is like, is there anything different, a different approach we're taking just in that sort of regular day-to-day maintenance across the network, going forward? That's part one. That's question one. I've forgotten to follow up, Phil, if that's right.
So I'll just be very careful here, because I don't want to throw any colleagues under the bus, but there's a differentiation between the roading-related stormwater and the stormwater mains, and the frequency of clearing out those catch pits or sumps and that type of thing. It's probably a combination of both in terms of intensity of rainfall and quantity and what you've described. So I'd have to have a chat to Lynette and see if there's any information we can bring back on.
That's good, because like I guess my second question was, it's becoming apparent to me that like how we manage our stormwater and what it's doing to the roads are inextricably linked. They are, particularly in certain parts of like Banks Peninsula.
And in fact, we had a meeting yesterday. One of the things we have to do in preparation for the reforms is being very clear on what assets belong with which entity, because some will go with the new entity, some will stay with council, and making sure that nothing falls through the gaps in terms of nobody's looking after it anymore. So that's a piece of work we're doing at the moment.
I'm also picking up that there's a lot of crossover, a lot of collaboration between those two.
Oh, absolutely there is, and that's just making sure the first part is who does what. The second part is service level agreements between the two organisations to make sure that things don't fall through the gaps. But yeah, dealing with that increase in intensity and quantity is going to be something we have to continually work on.
Okay, we'll leave it there. Thank you.
Just a quick one from me. Last week when I was at the Canterbury Mayoral Forum, it was made very clear to me that there are going to be no stormwater basin consents given for the next 12 months. So the $100 million that you've got up your sleeve for doing, I know is going to be held up by stormwater basins. Can you say redirect that towards, we'll say, Summerfield Street? So more or less you've been given $100 million that you don't have to spend this year. You'll find places to spend it on, and I'm saying Summerfield Street.
So I mentioned briefly about the filtration devices that we're putting into Addington Brook and Riccarton Stream instead. They do the same job. They are new technology, and they're like they've got a special medium in them with a bark bed and planting and what have you. So instead of what we're looking at is are they appropriate for the likes of the Waitaki Basin, where we will no longer need to dig out as much contaminated soil and cart it away. We'll be able to build these things and achieve the same treatment. So we'll be using that money to do that type of work.
Excellent, excellent. Kelly?
Back to my question. Thanks, Brent. Really interested in surface flooding and how much, of your time that takes, and whether we have the resources, because I guess every time it rains, we have a significant surface water collecting in different places. You must be in a situation where you sort of have to prioritize these and work through them. Do you feel like you've got enough resource, enough staff to deal with those issues as they come up?
I know we've had some staff give a previous presentation to council on that very issue of flooding on roads, and I'll use the word again. Often it is nuisance flooding. It's a damn nuisance, but it's not getting into dwellings. So our priority is always our levels of service, where we're stopping water getting into over and above floor levels. But we have committed this year to investigate some solutions for a couple of the areas that were raised during the annual plan, and it may be that some not temporary but more cost-effective solutions can be put in place just to take the top off some of these things. But it does take a bit of time, but that's what we're here for. Just keeping the network going.
Okay, thank you.
Brent,
We'll
is it
appreciate
worth-
what you
sorry.
do. Thanks.
Kelly, is it also worth this whole challenge around expectations of what we can actually achieve versus the reality of significant rain events, and how we manage through that as well, I think is important. So we're very clear about what we can do and what we're not able to do. And I think we need to do some more thinking around that.
Yeah, when we get significant events, they don't always hit the city in the same place, but we know the pinch points, we know the hot spots, and our contractors are very good. They mobilise. We get out there in preparation, making sure grates are cleared, making sure pumps are in place, that type of thing. So we have, Tim, do you want to comment on what happens? Yeah.
Well, from a resourcing perspective, I think between Three Waters and Transport and all our contractors, we've got enough resourcing on the day to deal with the majority of stuff that we've seen over the last few years. In a number of situations, there's nothing we can actually do until the rain stops and the water drains away. So I'm comfortable at this stage.
Yeah.
Right. I have noticed that the communication has been really good. Obviously, I'm thinking about Tenby and Newport Street. But yeah, the more we communicate with, that we're doing our best, I think the better people understand.
Yes,
it's really
exactly.
Okay,
really
now what
important.
we've got to be upstairs at 25 past, okay? We've got three more questions, but you're actually finished. You're just looking at questions now?
Well, the only other one is flood protection, but it's very small now. It really just deals with stop banking that protects from tidal flooding as opposed to stormwater, rainwater. And so you've really only got very similar things to stormwater because they're intrinsically linked. So it's mainly the Lower Avon stop banks and the Woolston Barrage that are covered by that activity.
Okay.
Other than that, it's everything else is dealt with under the stormwater activity.
Okay. So Andre hasn't had any questions, then you had one, and the other two, sorry, I will get you to put them forward to the, so far away, mate.
Oh, I'm happy to withdraw. Someone else has a burning question. You're good.
That's all cool. So, all right, well, we need to be upstairs in 2 minutes. So thank you very much, Brent.